Welcome into the PFF NFL Daily. I know that's loud sometimes. I apologize. People complaining about their eardrums. But today we're talking quarterbacks. We're talking the QB carousel, which has been pretty crazy over the last couple of years. And I think I don't know if there's going to be a lot of QB movement necessarily this offseason, but there's a lot of QB needy teams out there. So let's go through them, Sam. I got at least 11 teams listed here as must have. 11 teams on my list. And there's still a few TBDs on there. So where do you want to start? Who's the most QB needy team around?
Yeah, it's interesting. I have 8 teams are absolutely in the quarterback market, and then I have 6 more that could easily be, depending on how things go. And I think for that reason alone, it's going to be a fascinating group where some of these teams probably stick with what they have just because of the demand, right? Like if you're a Seattle Seahawks or if you're a Washington football team, if you're the New York Giants, do you need a quarterback? Yeah, maybe, probably, in fact. But do you really want to jump into the quarterback market with the other 8, 9, 10, 11, however many teams there are that you decide need quarterbacks? Maybe not. Like at some point, the demand dramatically outstrips the supply, and you might say, you know what? Let's re-up Geno Smith. He's done a pretty good job this year. It was a giant jump forward. Let's see how high we can push this thing. Or Daniel Jones. Yeah, he showed some things, maybe not enough, but what are the chances we can dramatically upgrade here? Washington, they're already talking themselves into re-upping with Carson Wentz and going again if he can manage to lead them into the playoffs this year. I think that's the sort of first dynamic is how many of these teams that probably need an upgrade at quarterback or would like one decide just by looking at who else is out there in the market to, you know what, let's stick with what we have and maybe punt that decision for a year.
I've said this thing the last couple of years. I do believe that the NFL has changed since you referenced on the PFF NFL podcast today the years where Brody Croyle was the starter for the Kansas City Chiefs and Andy Dalton was kind of like the minimum viable starter, and he was QB 15 in the NFL. I still believe that we have plenty of those types of players. Marcus Mariota, who the Falcons are probably going to move on from, is a viable NFL starter. He's fine. You just don't want to have Marcus Mariota as your starter because he might be the 30th best starter in the NFL or the 28th best starter in the NFL. So it is such a fascinating time in the NFL where I don't think it's tough to find a starter. You could throw Mike White in the mix. Could Mike White be a starter in the NFL? Sure. But the Jets are clearly going to be looking for their next quarterback at some point this offseason, aren't they? And the Raiders, when we talk about our lists of teams here, the Raiders actively threw their name onto these lists. They have a Derek Carr who most of these teams would actually want, right? If they're just trying to upgrade, I think there's going to be a market for Derek Carr this offseason with what the Colts have just been through or what the Jets have just been through or what the Bucs might have to go through, with Tom Brady as a free agent. There's going to be a market for Derek Carr, but the Raiders actively opted out and said, okay, we're done with Derek Carr. We want to get better or we want to get younger. It makes the whole quarterback dynamic just fascinating because every team's at kind of a different point in their life cycle.
Yeah, and obviously you have the prospect of the draft and how many are going to be available in this draft. Like we're talking about upwards of 10 teams in need of a quarterback upgrade. Half of those teams don't have a pick in the top half of the first round of this draft. Even if they do, there aren't that many quarterbacks available in the top half of the first round of this draft. So, there are certain teams I think it's going to take care of themselves. Right now, the Houston Texans are sitting with the number 1 overall pick. That positions them perfectly to take whatever quarterback they think is the best one available in this draft. Okay, that could change if they win a game in the last couple. If Chicago manages to lose and the positions reverse themselves in the draft, but Houston should be well taken care of in the draft just by their positioning with that pick. But not that many of these teams are going to be positioned at the very sharp end of this draft. Carolina is trying to take themselves out of that contention with the wins they're racking up and maybe even take the division, take themselves further out of the equation. And a couple of these teams that need a quarterback don't have the first round pick because they traded them away.
All right, we'll break down the top 10 in a minute, but I've got to tell you about our friends over at Prize Picks. How does it work? Well, you pick 2 to 5 players, and if they'll see if they'll score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. There's no competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. Prize Picks offers projections on any sport that you watch, which includes NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL, PGA, college football, men's college basketball, women's college basketball, soccer, WNBA, esports, NASCAR, tennis, MMA, boxing, disc golf, Euro basketball, cricket, and much more. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. Safe and fast withdrawals. You can't forget about that greatness. Download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code DAILY. If you deposit $100, Prize Picks gives you $100. If you deposit $50, Prize Picks gives you $50. Don't forget to enter promo code DAILY at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. DAILY, that's the promo code. Yeah, this entire top 10, Sam, is just incredible, right? So the Texans right now could be number one. They would be the official number one pick right now. They need a quarterback. Lions at 4 could be in the quarterback market. Colts at 6. They obviously need a quarterback. The Falcons likely need a quarterback depending on how they feel about Desmond Ridder. They're at 7. Panthers are at 8 at the moment, but again, like you said, could be dropping. Raiders are now at 10 in need of a quarterback, and then the Texans circle back at pick 12. So when we talk about quarterback needy teams in the draft, they're certainly there. There's a bunch of them in the top 10. And as of right now, the PFF draft board has 5 first-round caliber quarterbacks. Bryce Young from Alabama, Will Levis from Kentucky, C.J. Stroud from Ohio State, Tanner McKee from Stanford, and Anthony Richardson from Florida.
And a couple of those guys are potential, I don't want to use the term project, but might not necessarily be like day one NFL ready. You know, they might not be answering somebody's problems this year right out of the gate, and could be more longer-term developmental work. So again, if you're one of these teams that, and there's a number of teams in this group who have a pretty good roster outside of the quarterback position, you might not be looking at those guys in the draft, even if you have them available to you. So, for example, the New York Jets right now, they might make the playoffs this year despite not having a quarterback. That's how capable the rest of that roster is. Maybe they can convince themselves Mike White can be the guy going forward. Maybe they end up in the Jimmy Garoppolo, Tom Brady, Derek Carr sweepstakes. Tampa Bay might somehow bumble their way to the playoffs despite having Tom Brady at quarterback. That's a team that could potentially win next year if they had a veteran quarterback come right in. I think there's a number of these teams that are actually in a pretty good spot, other than the most important position in the game being a question mark.
All right, when it comes to the whole carousel and a bunch of those names that you mentioned, the other name to just mention really quick is Lamar Jackson, who does not have his long-term contract yet with the Ravens. I'm going to assume that they figure it out, right? There's going to be some sort of deal worked out, whether it's long-term, short-term, whatever it is. Let's take Lamar out of the equation. But Tom Brady's a free agent. Jimmy Garoppolo, free agent. Geno Smith's a free agent. Derek Carr is going to be on the trading block. Those are the big 4 who are potentially, or who are going to be available. And you have to throw the Commanders in there. All those teams who feel like they're close are going to want to be looking at those guys. The teams that are picking in the top 10, the Colts, the Texans, the Falcons, I assume that they're going to want to go the younger route. And then you have a team like the Lions who have both, right? I mean, they have Jared Goff on the roster. Is there a veteran up? They're probably not going to have a veteran upgrade for Goff, but they might want to go younger and use that top 10 pick on a quarterback so they could compete now with Goff, but also look to the future at quarterback as well.
Yeah, don't forget there's also this sort of lingering specter of, at any given moment, Green Bay could decide, do we want to trade away Aaron Rodgers? Like, is it time that we go in a different direction, that we move Jordan Love, that we move on from Jordan Love? Like, maybe Jordan Love becomes the trade candidate. Like, all of a sudden, in addition to the free agent quarterbacks and the draft quarterbacks, there's also a couple of names out there that could become available for trade, which does a couple of things. One, it throws a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers or Jordan Love into this mix. But 2, it immediately propels a team like Green Bay into the conversation of, do they need a quarterback?
Well, if they trade Rodgers, I assume they're going with Love.
Right.
If they trade Love, they'll have Rodgers. Man, what happened? It felt like at the beginning of the season, every team felt pretty good about their quarterback situation, right? Doesn't that happen every year? I get suckered in every single year, Sam. 32 teams feel either good about their quarterback situation or they at least have a young guy to develop. But when a Zach Wilson doesn't take a step forward, or you're in bridge quarterback territory like the Falcons or like the Colts, and it just doesn't work out, all of a sudden you're very much back in this mix. So, man, it's going to be crazy again. About half the league is in the QB market again.
Yeah, what happened is a bunch of those teams had a quarterback who ended up with a PFF grade in the 50s and the 40s, and all of a sudden you need a quarterback again.
I'm telling you, the Seahawks might be the story of the offseason because Geno Smith had a very good season. But if the Seahawks are sitting there picking at 4 or 5 overall, they have a golden opportunity to get their next guy instead of re-signing Geno Smith. We'll see how much they like these quarterbacks. And I don't want to be that guy, Sam, but next year's quarterback class, Caleb Williams, Drake May, watch out. Next year's going to be even better.
Every year, next year's the year.
I'm already doing it. All right, let us know. What do you think of the quarterback carousel here in December? It's a PFF